You are utterly, unbelievably, and intentionally sickening. Brenda's voice wasn't just sharp, it was a serrated blade, carving through the convivial hum of my own backyard barbecue, her face a gargoyle's mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Every single day, Agnes, it's something. If it's not your whining, it's your deliberate mess-making. That lemonade, all over my brand new, $300 patio cushions. Are you so far gone in your senility that you can't hold a pitcher, or are you just a nasty, malicious old woman trying to provoke me? I swear, I've had it up to here with your games. Her finger, a vicious talon, nearly poked my eye out. My own temper, usually a slow simmer, threatened to boil over. My hand, still damp from where she'd violently snatched the lemonade pitcher, causing the spill herself in her customary tyrannical haste, clenched into a fist. My games, Brenda. I shot back, my voice trembling but loud enough to carry over her tirade. It was an accident, a clumsy moment made worse by your impatience. And how dare you? How dare you stand in my home, the home my husband Arthur and I built with our bare hands and loving hearts, and call me malicious? You, who waltzed in here with your airs and your endless criticisms, turning my son's head with your conniving ways. This was it, the explosion I'd held back for years. Mark, my poor, spineless Mark, flitted nervously at the edge of the storm, his face pale and sweaty. Mom. Brenda, for heaven's sake. Not here. Not now. Our friends, the neighbors. His plea was a pathetic whisper against the hurricane of her rage, and Brenda rounded on him like a viper. Oh, don't you dare, Mom, Brenda, me, Mark. You were supposed to handle this. You promised me, months ago, that you'd sort out your mother. She's out of control. This isn't a home anymore, it's a madhouse, and I refuse to live like this a moment longer. You are weak, Mark. Weak. Her eyes, glittering with a terrifying triumph, snapped back to me. The storm of her immediate fury suddenly calmed, replaced by a chilling, predatory smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a general about to announce an unavoidable, crushing defeat upon her enemy. Actually, Agnes, she purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness now, a stark contrast to her earlier screeching, you're quite right. Things are going to change. Effective almost immediately. Mark and I have had a very serious discussion, several, in fact, and we've made a decision. For your own good, of course. We've found a charming, secure facility. It's called Golden Meadows Senior Care. Top of the line. You'll be so much safer there. Happier. We're aiming to have you settled in by the end of the month. Consider this your official notice. The world tilted. The scent of grilled chicken and freshly cut grass, the laughter of children playing down the street, it all receded into a dull, roaring silence in my ears. Golden Meadows. The name itself was an insult, a flowery euphemism for the end of my life as I knew it. My eyes darted to Mark. He wouldn't meet my gaze. His head was bowed, his shoulders slumped, the image of a man utterly defeated, or perhaps, a willing executioner. The betrayal, colder and sharper than any winter wind, pierced me to the core. My own son, siding with this harpy, to cast me out. The faces of our guests swam before me, a sea of shocked, pitying stares. This was public humiliation, a spectacle orchestrated by the monster he'd married. My mind reeled, struggling to absorb the sheer brutality of her pronouncement, the casual cruelty with which she announced the dismantling of my existence. This wasn't just about a nursing home. This was about erasure. This was about Brenda finally getting everything she'd ever wanted, my house, my son, and me, out of her perfectly curated picture. But then, through the fog of shock and despair, a tiny, defiant spark ignited. Arthur's voice, from years ago, whispered in my memory, "You're stronger than you think, Aggie. And a damn sight smarter than that one gives you credit for." Was I just going to let this happen? Was this how my story ended, packed off in disgrace? As if sensing that flicker of defiance, that refusal to completely crumble before her, Brenda delivered another vicious blow, her voice hardening again. And don't even think about fighting this, Agnes, she sneered, stepping closer, invading my personal space. Mark has already given his full consent. We've even had a preliminary consultation with a lawyer. We have documented your episodes. Your increasing forgetfulness, your accidents, your general inability to cope. If you resist, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal avenues to ensure your welfare. It'll be messy, public, and you will lose. This is a kindness, really. Accept it. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Legal action. Declared incompetent. My own son, my Mark, would testify against me. It was a checkmate, or so she thought. But in that moment of her supposed ultimate triumph, as she laid out her vile, meticulous plan, something else clicked within me, a memory surfacing like a life raft in a stormy sea. Arthur, his hand over mine, signing papers in Mr. Henderson's office. His firm voice, "This is for you, Agnes. Only for you. Your security. Your decision. No one else's. The will. The house. My name." A sudden, electrifying clarity cut through the pain. The chessboard wasn't hers to control. The guests were still frozen, conversations dead. Brenda was smirking, watching me, expecting tears, a breakdown, surrender. She saw the old woman, the victim. She didn't see the steel forging in my spine, the plan already beginning to bloom in the ashes of her attack. She thought she'd delivered the final, crushing blow. She had no idea she'd just handed me the weapon I needed. My shock was morphing into a cold, hard resolve. Oh, there would be a change, all right. A massive change. But it wouldn't be me moving to Golden Meadows. I took a slow, deliberate breath, meeting her gaze with a steadiness that seemed to surprise her. The tremor in my hands stilled. "Is that all, Brenda?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "Have you quite finished dictating the terms of my surrender?" Before she could retort, before she could unleash another torrent, I turned, not to her, not to Mark, but I walked with as much dignity as I could muster towards my back door. Inside, on the little table by the phone, was my old address book. Mr. Henderson's number was in there. This wasn't just about saving myself. This was about justice. Arthur's justice. And mine. My fingers, white-knuckled, hovered over the numbers for L.M. Henderson, Arthur's bulldog of a lawyer. The venom from Brenda's barbecue ambush still coursed through me, a poisonous fire threatening to consume what little fight I had left. But this inferno wasn't new. It was merely the visible eruption of a volcano that had been rumbling for years, its pressure building with every calculated cruelty, every insidious betrayal she'd inflicted. Golden Meadows wasn't just a plan, it was the endgame of a meticulously plotted war Brenda had been waging against me since the moment she first crossed my threshold, her eyes gleaming not with love for my son, but with the cold, hard ambition of a conqueror sighting new territory, my territory. Arthur, my dear, departed Arthur, he wasn't just a good man, he was a seer of souls. The very first evening Mark paraded Brenda before us, her designer dress clinging to her like a second skin and her laughter a little too loud, a little too forced. Arthur's gaze had been unervingly steady. Later, when the scent of her cloying perfume had finally dissipated from our living room, he'd turned to me, his jovial face etched with an uncharacteristic gravity. "That one, Agnes," he'd stated, not asked, his voice low and certain, "she's not just after Mark's heart, she's after his inheritance. And this house? It's the crown jewel in her sights. She looks at you, my love, and doesn't see a mother, she sees an obstacle. Mark is blinded by her facade, but you, Aggie, you keep your eyes wide open. She'll play sweet, but there's a viper coiled beneath those silks." His words then felt like a splash of cold water, a shocking premonition I'd foolishly dismissed as an old man's overprotectiveness. Oh, how they screamed at me now with the clarity of a fire alarm in a burning building. I'd tried, heaven help me, I'd tried to embrace her, to find the goodness Mark insisted was there. But every gesture of mine was met with her subtle sabotage. I remember offering her my mother's lace tablecloth for a dinner party she was hosting. "Oh, Agnes, that's quaint," she'd said, her lips curling almost imperceptibly, but it's terribly old-fashioned, isn't it? And probably terribly fragile. We wouldn't want any accidents. The implication was clear: my treasures were her trash, my history an inconvenience. The escalation after Arthur's passing wasn't gradual, it was a relentless barrage disguised as concern. The brochures for luxury senior living weren't just left around, they were presented, with Mark sitting beside her looking like a condemned prisoner, his eyes pleading with me to just accept. "Mom, Brenda found this amazing place," he'd begin, his voice strained. "It has a pool, activities. It's not what you think." I'd thrown one right back at her once, my hands shaking with rage. "I think I'm perfectly capable of living in my own home, the home your father built for me." "I think you are trying to push me out, Brenda." Her response? A chillingly calm, "Agnes, your temper. It's becoming quite alarming. This is exactly the kind of outburst that worries us. What if you fell? What if you had an episode when no one was here?" That was her genius, her particular brand of evil, twisting every act of defiance, every assertion of my own sanity, into further proof of my decline. She even tried to get me to sign over power of attorney once, a sheaf of papers produced casually after a Sunday lunch. "Just a formality, Agnes," she'd cooed, "so Mark and I can help manage your affairs if, anything happens. To make things easier for you." I'd looked at Mark, expecting, praying for him to intervene, to say something. He just stared at his plate, pushing peas around with his fork, his silence a deafening betrayal. "I'll have my lawyer look at them, Brenda," I'd said, my voice like ice, and snatched the papers from her perfectly manicured hand. The look of fury that flashed in her eyes before she masked it with a saccharine smile was a blow I felt for days. Carol, my fiery, loyal Carol, had nearly exploded when I told her about that incident. The unmitigated nerve of that witch, she'd roared, pacing my kitchen like a caged lioness. "Power of attorney? She might as well ask for your damn soul on a silver platter." And Mark just sat there. "Agnes, I'm telling you, you need to fight her tooth and nail. Arthur wouldn't stand for this, and neither should you. He left you protected, I know he did. You need to find out how." She'd even marched over to my house one afternoon when Brenda was there, a file in her hand about elder abuse and financial exploitation, and tried to give it to me right in front of her. Brenda had gone pale, then red, and actually tried to snatch the file from Carol, hissing, "How dare you interfere in our family matters and upset Agnes with such nonsense." It was a full-blown confrontation, voices raised, right in my living room, with me caught in the middle, feeling both horrified and fiercely grateful for Carol's audacity. Mark, arriving home to that scene, had actually shouted at Carol to leave, accusing her of harassing his wife and upsetting his mother. Another blow, directly from my son. The insidious campaign to label me as mentally unfit intensified after that. Brenda would move my belongings, then deny having touched them, watching with a smug little smirk as I searched frantically for my glasses, my keys, my medication. "Oh, Agnes, there you go again," she'd sigh loud enough for Mark to hear from the other room. "You misplaced them just yesterday, remember? We had this same conversation." She even called my doctor once, impersonating a concerned neighbor, trying to elicit information about my health, subtly suggesting I was a danger to myself. Thankfully, Dr. Evans was an old friend of Arthur's and saw right through it, calling me immediately. That day, the sheer, calculated malice of her scheming hit me like a physical assault. This wasn't just about the house anymore, this was about destroying my credibility, my very identity, until I had nothing left. And Mark, my once gentle, loving son, became her echo, her enforcer. I remember one evening, I'd refused to eat the bland, tasteless meal Brenda had prepared, insisting it was something specifically for my delicate digestion. I'd simply said I wasn't hungry for that. Mark had slammed his fist on the table, his face contorted with a frustration I'd never seen before. "Mom, for God's sake, can't you just be cooperative for once? Brenda slaves away trying to take care of you, and all you do is complain and make things difficult. No wonder she thinks you need professional help." "Sometimes, I think so too." His words were like daggers. The loving son was gone, replaced by this angry, resentful stranger who looked at me with his wife's eyes. That night, I wept not for Arthur, but for the son I had lost to that venomous woman. Every cherished memory of Arthur, every corner of the home we built, became a battleground. Brenda wanted to update Arthur's study, his sanctuary, into a home gym for herself. When I refused, vehemently, she'd staged a passive-aggressive protest, letting dust gather, accidentally knocking over a box of his old papers. It was a war of attrition, designed to wear me down, to make me concede inch by painful inch. The barbecue, Brenda's triumphant pronouncement about Golden Meadows, her smug dismissal of my entire life, it wasn't the opening salvo, it was her victory lap. Or so she thought. She hadn't counted on Arthur's enduring love, his foresight. She hadn't counted on the fight left in this old woman, a fight fueled by years of her carefully catalogued cruelties. My finger finally found its resolve, pressing down on the numbers for Mr. Henderson. The buzzing in my ear stopped, replaced by a ringing, then a crisp, professional voice. Henderson and Associates, how may I direct your call? My voice, when I spoke, was surprisingly steady, infused with the cold fury of a woman who had been pushed too far, a woman who was finally ready to unleash hell. This is Agnes Periwinkle, I stated, each word a steel pellet. Arthur Periwinkle was my husband. I need to speak with Mr. Henderson. Urgently. It's about my house. It's about my life. And it's about stopping a thief before she steals everything I hold dear. The polished mahogany desk of Mr. Henderson's office felt like an island of sanity in the churning ocean of my life. His words, confirming Arthur's meticulous provisions, the absolute, unassailable fact that the house, my sanctuary, was mine and mine alone to command, were the first solid ground I'd felt beneath my feet in years. For a precious hour, the venom of Brenda's barbecue ultimatum seemed to recede, replaced by a surge of righteous power. Arthur, my wise Arthur, had indeed armed me from beyond the grave. But even as Mr. Henderson, a man whose sharp gaze missed nothing, outlined my options, he'd issued a grave warning, his brow furrowed. Agnes, he'd said, his voice resonating with the wisdom of countless legal battles, a woman like your daughter-in-law, when cornered, when her sense of entitlement is threatened, she won't go down easily. Expect her to fight dirty. Expect her to escalate. Be prepared for anything. His words, a chilling prophecy, began to manifest the moment I stepped back into that house, my house, now a battleground. Brenda was waiting, her arms crossed, her foot tapping an impatient rhythm on the hallway tiles, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Well, where have you been, Agnes? She demanded, her voice laced with a new, more aggressive edge. Disappearing for hours without a word. One might think you were plotting something. Her accusation, so close to the truth, was a deliberate blow, designed to rattle me, to see if I'd crack. I mumbled something about an overdue doctor's appointment, a lie that felt like ashes in my mouth, but the confrontation, the immediate challenge, was a stark reminder that Henderson was right. This was just the beginning of her counteroffensive. The very air in the house grew thick with her scheming. She became my shadow, her feigned concern now an oppressive surveillance. My phone calls were subtly monitored, my mail sometimes appeared already opened, by accident, of course. One afternoon, I was in my bedroom, supposedly napping, when I heard hushed, urgent voices from downstairs. Creeping to the landing, my heart pounding like a war drum, I overheard Brenda on the phone, her voice a venomous whisper that carried with chilling clarity. No, the end of the month is too slow now, she hissed into the receiver. Things are complicated. I need to accelerate the process with Agnes. The usual channels are taking too long. Are you sure there isn't a faster way to get her assessed, declared incapable? There's a significant debt riding on this, and my creditors are not patient people. A debt. So, it wasn't just greed for my home, for a life of unearned luxury, it was desperation. She was being squeezed, and I was her golden goose, to be plucked and butchered to save her own skin. The conspiracy wasn't just against me, it was a frantic bid to stave off her own ruin. And who was she talking to? An unscrupulous doctor? A predatory lawyer specializing in elder exploitation? The secret alliance Henderson had warned about was real, and it was actively working to expedite my demise. This massive blow sent a fresh wave of terror through me, colder and more profound than before. This wasn't just a family squabble, this was potentially criminal. The stakes had just been raised to a terrifying new level. But the most soul-crushing betrayal, the one that truly ripped the ground from beneath me, came not from Brenda, but from my own son. A few days later, pretending to be out visiting Carol, I'd circled back to the house, a gnawing unease I couldn't shake compelling me to return. I let myself in through the back door, quiet as a mouse. And there they were. In my bedroom. Brenda was directing Mark as he systematically went through my desk drawers, my private papers, even the little box where I kept Arthur's letters. "Are you sure the will isn't here, Mark?" Brenda urged, her voice tight with frustration. "She must keep a copy somewhere. That old lawyer of hers wouldn't give me the time of day. If we can find it, maybe there's a loophole, something we can contest." Mark, my son, his face a mask of grim determination I barely recognized, was actively participating in this violation, this desecration of my privacy, of Arthur's memory. "I don't know, Bren," he muttered, rifling through a folder. "Mom's been acting different since the barbecue. Cagey. Maybe Henderson told her to hide it." To hear him, my Mark, so casually discussing my supposed cunning, so deeply enmeshed in her plot to dispossess me, it was like a physical blow to my heart. I almost cried out, almost burst in and confronted them, but a cold, strategic thought stayed my tongue. Let them reveal the depths of their depravity. Let them think they were winning. I slipped away, unseen, the image of my son ransacking my life burned into my soul. This wasn't just weakness anymore, this was active, willing treachery. The house became a prison of paranoia. I started hiding my important documents at Carol's, smuggling them out like a resistance fighter. Brenda, sensing my withdrawal, perhaps my secret consultations with Henderson, ramped up her psychological warfare. She'd leave post-it notes around the house with reminders, "For me, Agnes, don't forget to turn off the stove." I hadn't used it in days. "Agnes, your doctor's appointment is Tuesday at 10. It wasn't. She was deliberately trying to create a paper trail of my supposed incompetence, to gaslight me into oblivion, all while her own deadline from her creditors loomed. She even had a new, oily little man, a geriatric care consultant, she called him, come to the house to assess my needs. He asked intrusive questions, his eyes cold and clinical, clearly a hired gun in her campaign to have me declared unfit. I refused to answer most of his questions, much to Brenda's theatrical dismay. Her true nature, stripped bare of any pretense, was horrifyingly apparent one evening when Mark was working late. She was on the phone again, this time, I was certain, to one of her creditors, her voice no longer hushed but raw with a desperate, snarling fury. "Look, I told you I'll have the money," she almost screamed. "The old bat is proving more stubborn than I thought, but she'll break. People like her always do. Just give me 2 more weeks. One way or another, that house, or its equivalent in cash, will be mine. And if she tries to get clever, well, there are ways to handle senile old women who don't know what's good for them." To hear myself described as the old bat, to hear the undisguised menace in her tone, it wasn't just insulting, it was terrifying. She was capable of anything. The weight of it all, the constant vigilance, the betrayals, the escalating threats, it began to take its toll. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring into the darkness, wondering if I truly had the strength to fight these vipers. Could I really sell my home, Arthur's legacy, just to escape them? Was I strong enough to face the public fallout, the inevitable confrontation? For a fleeting, desperate moment, the thought of just giving in, of letting Golden Meadows swallow me whole, flickered through my exhausted mind. It would be easier, wouldn't it? To just let the darkness take over. That was her goal, of course, to break my spirit entirely. That was the deepest, most insidious part of her conspiracy. But then I'd remember Arthur's face, his unwavering belief in me. I'd remember Carol's fierce loyalty, her refusal to let me surrender. And I'd remember the raw, unadulterated greed in Brenda's eyes, the casual cruelty in Mark's betrayal. No. I would not break. I would not let them win. That flicker of despair was quickly extinguished by a fresh surge of cold, hard anger. They thought they were tightening the noose, but they were just strengthening my resolve. I had one more call to make, not to Mr. Henderson this time, but to someone Carol had once mentioned, a woman who specialized in unconventional solutions, someone who could move like a ghost and strike like a cobra. The conspiracy was deep, yes. But my determination to unearth it, to obliterate it, was deeper still. The game was far from over. The air in my own home had become a toxic miasma of suspicion and barely concealed hostility. Brenda, fueled by her looming debts and an almost pathological need to control, escalated her campaign from insidious scheming to outright psychological warfare. She knew I'd spoken to Henderson. My newfound, albeit fragile, composure was a dead giveaway. Her response was not to retreat, but to charge, to attempt to bludgeon me into submission before I could mount any effective defense. The whispers and manipulations gave way to overt threats, to confrontations so vile they left me shaking for hours, pushing me, inch by agonizing inch, towards an abyss I hadn't known existed within me. This was no longer just a conspiracy, it was a siege, and I was the last bastion, about to crumble. One morning, she stormed into my bedroom without knocking, her face a mask of thunderous rage, Mark trailing in her wake like a particularly pathetic storm cloud. She brandished my small, locked diary, Arthur's last gift to me, in her hand. "What is this, Agnes?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. "What secrets are you scribbling in here? Plots? Lies about me and Mark to feed to that shyster lawyer of yours?" Before I could even protest, she took a letter opener from my desk and, with a vicious stab, pried the lock open, its delicate mechanism snapping with a sickening crack. My private thoughts, my grief for Arthur, my bewildered pain at their cruelty, all splayed open for her malevolent eyes. It was a violation so profound, so personal, it felt like she'd flayed a piece of my soul. "Brenda, you have no right." I gasped, lunging for my diary, but Mark, my own son, stepped between us, his arms out, blocking me. "Mom, just calm down," he said, his voice strained but firm, echoing her earlier accusations. "Brenda's just concerned. You've been acting so strangely. We need to understand what's going on with you. If you won't talk to us, then..." He didn't finish the sentence, but the unspoken threat of him siding with her brutal invasion of my innermost thoughts was a massive blow, another layer of betrayal that left me breathless. They were a united front now, an occupying force in my life, and my own child was one of them, his eyes holding not a shred of compassion, only a weary impatience for me to capitulate. The confrontations became a daily ritual of torment. Brenda would pick fights over imagined slights, her voice escalating to a scream, accusing me of deliberately trying to antagonize her, of faking illness, of hiding assets. She started restricting my access to the telephone, claiming I was agitating myself with unnecessary calls. She even had the audacity to tell Mrs. Henderson next door, my dear friend Carol's sister-in-law, that I was having dangerous delusions and that they were exploring options for my safety. She was systematically isolating me, painting me as unhinged to the outside world, ensuring that if I screamed, no one would believe me. The walls of my own home were becoming the bars of a cage, with my daughter-in-law as the gleeful, sadistic warden. The true breaking point, the moment my spirit finally fractured under the relentless pressure, came on a gray, rain-lashed afternoon. Brenda had called another family meeting, this one featuring a stern-faced woman she introduced as Ms. Albright, a social worker specializing in geriatric crisis intervention. This Ms. Albright, with her cold eyes and clipboard, exuded an air of officious authority. Brenda presented her case with theatrical tears, recounting fabricated incidents of my erratic behavior, my refusal to accept help, my increasing paranoia. Mark sat beside her, nodding gravely, adding his own carefully chosen, damning anecdotes. I listened, a cold dread coiling in my stomach, as they expertly wove a narrative that portrayed me as a senile, dangerous burden on the verge of complete collapse. Then Ms. Albright turned to me, her voice devoid of warmth. "Mrs. Periwinkle," she stated, not asked, "based on your family's testimony and my initial observations, I am recommending an immediate 72-hour psychiatric evaluation at the county facility. Your son has already signed the preliminary consent forms as your next of kin concerned for your welfare. A transport will be here in the morning to escort you. The words hit me with the force of a physical assault. Psychiatric evaluation. County facility. Transport. This was it. This was how they were going to do it. No Golden Meadows luxury facade, just the cold, clinical efficiency of the state, brought down upon me by their lies and my son's ultimate, unforgivable betrayal. That was when I broke. Something inside me, some dam of grief and rage and terror that I had unknowingly been holding back for years, finally burst. A guttural sob tore from my throat, followed by another, and another, until I was consumed by a storm of weeping so violent it shook my entire frame. No. I wailed, the sound animalistic, raw. You can't do this. I am not crazy. You are the monsters. You, Brenda, with your greed and your lies. And you, Mark, you spineless traitor. You are destroying me. Arthur, oh, Arthur, what have they done to us? I collapsed onto the sofa, an incoherent, sobbing wreck, the carefully constructed dam of my composure utterly obliterated. This was my emotional breakdown, stark and horrifying, played out for their cold, assessing eyes. Brenda, of course, seized upon it immediately. You see, Ms. Albright, she said, her voice laced with a sickening blend of triumph and false pity. This is what we've been dealing with. She's completely hysterical. This just proves we're doing the right thing. Ms. Albright simply made a note on her clipboard, her expression unchanged. The all is lost moment washed over me with the icy finality of a tomb. They had won. They had used my grief, my fear, my very emotions against me, twisting them into proof of their narrative. Tomorrow morning, they would come for me. Tomorrow morning, I would be stripped of my home, my dignity, my freedom, all under the guise of their concern. That night, locked in my room, Brenda had actually turned the key from the outside. For my own safety, I lay on my bed, staring into the suffocating darkness, the tears still silently tracing paths down my wrinkled cheeks. The consequences of Brenda's relentless cruelty, of Mark's devastating weakness, had finally cornered me. There was no escape. Or was there? In the deepest pit of my despair, a memory of Arthur surfaced, vivid and strong. We were sitting on the porch swing, years ago, watching a summer storm roll in. Sometimes, Aggie, he'd said, his arm around me, when you're faced with a force that wants to destroy everything you hold dear, you can't just defend. Sometimes, you have to be willing to make a move so bold, so unexpected, it changes the entire game. Sometimes, you have to be willing to burn your own fields to save the harvest. Burn my own fields. The words echoed in the desolate chamber of my heart. What did I have left to lose that they weren't already determined to take? My home. My sanctuary. The place Arthur and I had poured our souls into. Brenda wanted it. She was about to get it, and me along with it, packaged and delivered to a mental ward. Unless I burned the field. A desperate, wild, terrifying idea began to take root in the ashes of my despair. It was a gamble of monumental proportions, a move so audacious it might just work, or it might destroy me utterly. But what was the alternative? A slow, living death in some sterile institution, stripped of everything that made me who I was? No. Not while I still had breath in my body. My gaze fell upon the old, rarely used emergency mobile phone Arthur had insisted I keep hidden in my bedside drawer, fully charged, for dire emergencies only. This, I thought with a surge of adrenaline that was part despair and part insane courage, qualified as a dire emergency. My trembling fingers fumbled with the tiny buttons, scrolling through the pre-programmed numbers. Not Henderson this time. Carol had once, years ago, in a hushed, conspiratorial tone after a particularly nasty run-in with a predatory contractor, mentioned a name, a woman, Martha Jenkins, a real estate agent who wasn't just discreet, she was a miracle worker, specializing in lightning-fast, complex, off-market sales. She can sell snow to Eskimos in a blizzard, Agnes, and make them thank her for it, Carol had said. My finger hovered over the call button. This was madness. This was my only hope. My trembling finger, guided by a desperate prayer and Arthur's furious spirit, pressed the call button. The name Martha Jenkins, Discrete Property Solutions, glowed faintly on the screen of that old emergency phone, a relic from a time when I believed such drastic measures would never be necessary. The line connected, and a brisk, no-nonsense voice answered, Jenkins. My own voice was a ragged whisper, raw from the weeping and the terror of Ms. Albright's pronouncement. Ms. Jenkins, I began, my name is Agnes Periwinkle. Carol Massey recommended you. I am in a terrible situation. I need to sell my house. Immediately. Possibly within days. And it must be done in absolute secrecy. There was a pause, a silence so profound I thought she'd hung up on what must have sounded like the ravings of a lunatic. Mrs. Periwinkle, Martha Jenkins finally replied, her tone cautious, edged with a professional skepticism I couldn't blame her for. That's a highly unusual request. Immediately, and secretly, are not terms usually conducive to a successful property transaction, especially if you're seeking fair market value. Are you under some kind of duress? Duress. It was an understatement of cosmic proportions. Ms. Jenkins, I urged, the words tumbling out, my daughter-in-law and my son, they are trying to have me committed. They've scheduled a transport to take me to a county facility tomorrow morning. They want my house. This house, Ms. Jenkins, is in my name only, my late husband Arthur made sure of it. Mr. L.M. Henderson is my lawyer, he can verify everything. If I don't sell it before they take me, I lose everything. My freedom, my home, my sanity. Please, you are my only hope. Another silence, then, Arthur Periwinkle's widow? And Henderson is your counsel? The ice in her voice thawed a fraction. I knew Arthur slightly, a good man. And Henderson is as straight as they come. All right, Mrs. Periwinkle. This is unorthodox, highly unorthodox, but I'm listening. If what you say is true, and Henderson can confirm the urgency and your sole title, I might know a way. But it will be a whirlwind, and there are no guarantees. Can you meet me? In 1 hour? There's a little coffee shop, the Corner Perk, 2 blocks from your address. Come alone. And Mrs. Periwinkle? Don't breathe a word of this to anyone but Henderson. If your family is as you say, they'll be watching. This was it, the first terrifying, exhilarating turnaround, a sliver of hope in the suffocating darkness. Getting out of my locked room and then out of the house was a feat of espionage worthy of a spy novel. I feigned a deep, exhausted sleep when Brenda checked on me, then, when I heard her and Mark settling down to watch television, their voices a low, smug murmur from the living room as they no doubt discussed their imminent victory, I silently turned the old, stiff key I'd hidden years ago inside a loose floorboard. Arthur had insisted on a manual override for every lock. I slipped out like a wraith, a small handbag with my essential papers clutched to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs with every creak of the stairs. The meeting with Martha Jenkins was a blur of hushed urgency. She was a whirlwind of efficiency, her sharp eyes assessing me, my story, the documents Mr. Henderson had already emailed her at my frantic, whispered request from a payphone I'd found near the park earlier that day after escaping. Martha didn't waste time. The market's hot in your neighborhood, Agnes, she'd said, already calling me by my first name, a gesture of camaraderie that warmed me. But a conventional sale takes weeks, months. We don't have weeks. We have hours. There's a cash buyer I know, a developer. He buys properties for land value, quick closes, no inspections, no sentimentality. He pays fair, but not top dollar. The advantage? Speed. Sheer, unadulterated speed. If your title is as clean as Henderson says, we could potentially close this, electronically, by tomorrow afternoon, before your transport arrives. But you'll need nerves of steel, Agnes. And you'll need to be completely unreachable by your son and daughter-in-law until it's done. This was the game-changing information, the audacious, terrifying lifeline I'd prayed for. A sale in less than 24 hours. It was madness. It was perfect. The next few hours were the most intense of my entire 80 years. Carol, bless her courageous soul, became my logistical commander. I couldn't go back to the house. Martha arranged for a courier to bring the sale documents to Carol's, where, with Carol and a notary Martha had on speed dial, I signed away my home, my fingers trembling so violently I could barely hold the pen. Every signature felt like a leap into the abyss, a severing of ties with my past, but also, a defiant reclamation of my future. Carol, meanwhile, was a fortress, fielding my frantic calls, relaying messages to Martha and Henderson, her voice a calm, reassuring presence in the storm of my fear. She even managed to pack a small suitcase of my most essential belongings, sneaking into my house while Brenda and Mark were out making final arrangements for my committal, a feat of bravery that brought tears to my eyes. The tension was almost unbearable. Martha needed a few final details, photos of the property's current condition, utility bills. I couldn't risk going back. Carol, disguised in an old gardening hat and sunglasses, took the photos with her phone, pretending to be a birdwatcher in my yard, nearly giving me a heart attack when Brenda came out to water the porch plants, eyeing her suspiciously. Each click of Carol's phone felt like a ticking bomb. Mr. Henderson, meanwhile, was a legal titan, battling the electronic red tape, ensuring every I was dotted, every T crossed, his gruff voice over the phone a counterpoint to Martha's brisk efficiency. It's a long shot, Agnes, he'd warned, but Arthur would have approved of the sheer damn audacity of it. We're fighting fire with fire, my dear. While this clandestine ballet of desperation and defiance played out, Brenda and Mark, blissfully unaware, were reveling in their impending triumph. I learned later from Carol, who had a brief, strained phone call with Mark where he tried to justify their actions, that Brenda had already started ordering new furniture for their master bedroom, my bedroom. She'd been on the phone with decorators, with contractors, planning the gut renovation of my kitchen, the one she'd always despised. Their arrogance, their absolute certainty of my defeat, was a bitter pill, but it also fueled my resolve. They were so busy dancing on my grave, they didn't see me clawing my way out of it. They even delivered one final, cruel blow. A note slipped under Carol's door for me, signed by Mark. Mom, the transport is confirmed for 9 a.m. Please don't make this difficult. It's for your own good. We love you. Love. The hypocrisy was nauseating. Then, late in the afternoon, as I sat huddled in Carol's spare room, starting at every shadow, Martha called. Agnes, her voice was tight, but beneath it, I could hear a tremor of excitement. We have a signed offer. Cash. No conditions. They've initiated the wire transfer. Henderson confirms the funds should clear overnight. The deeds will be electronically filed with the county registrar first thing in the morning. By 8:30 a.m. tomorrow, Agnes, that house will no longer be yours. It will belong to Stonebridge Developments. They are very keen to take possession. In fact, they plan to have a crew on site by mid-morning to secure the property and begin preliminary assessments for demolition. Demolition. The word was a shock, a pang of loss, but also, a savage, undeniable thrill. My beautiful home, Arthur's home, reduced to rubble? It was a brutal end, but it was my ending, not Brenda's. The script was flipped. The power had shifted, silently, seismically. While Brenda and Mark were dreaming of new paint colors and custom closets, the very foundations of their stolen future were being legally, irrevocably, removed from beneath their feet. They thought they were hours away from victory, from finally being rid of the inconvenient old woman who stood between them and their desires. They had no idea that I, Agnes Periwinkle, the frail, forgetful, hysterical woman they were so eager to discard, had just sold their dream out from under them. The trap was set. The new owners were, in effect, my avenging angels, their arrival timed almost perfectly to coincide with my supposed departure to a living hell. Tomorrow morning wasn't going to be my committal. It was going to be their reckoning. The morning of my supposed committal dawned gray and oppressive, a mirror to the suffocating dread that had been my constant companion. I'd slipped back into the house in the pre-dawn hours, a ghost in my own home, Carol having dropped me a block away after a sleepless night spent finalizing the last, terrifying details of my counteroffensive with Martha Jenkins and Mr. Henderson. Brenda was already up, humming a tuneless, self-satisfied little ditty in the kitchen, the aroma of brewing coffee, usually a comfort, now smelling like the bitter prelude to my execution. She'd even laid out a drab, sensible outfit on my bed, clothes suitable for a woman about to be stripped of her identity and locked away. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of it almost made me laugh, a wild, hysterical sound I had to choke back. Little did she know, the real drama was yet to unfold, and she was about to be the star of a tragedy she'd authored herself. Mark was subdued, his face pale, avoiding my eyes as he mechanically went through the motions of breakfast. Did he feel a flicker of guilt? A pang of remorse for the son he had ceased to be? Or was he merely steeling himself for the unpleasantness of seeing his own mother forcibly removed from her home? It scarcely mattered anymore. My heart, once so tender towards him, had been bruised and battered into a cold, hard knot of resolve. The transport, Ms. Albright's henchmen, were due at precisely 9 o'clock. Brenda kept glancing at the clock on the mantelpiece, Arthur's clock, with an air of barely suppressed excitement, like a child awaiting a long-promised treat. 8:55. Any moment now, my carefully constructed world, my desperate gamble, would either save me or condemn me utterly. The doorbell chimed, sharp and decisive, cutting through the strained silence. Brenda practically leaped to her feet, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "Ah, Agnes," she announced, her voice dripping with false concern that was almost obscene in its insincerity. "That will be your escort. So punctual. Don't you worry about a thing, dear. We'll take care of everything here. You just focus on getting better." She glided towards the front door, ready to welcome the men who would drag me away, ready to seal my fate. I rose slowly, my legs feeling strangely steady, a preternatural calm settling over me. This was it. The moment of truth. "Arthur," I prayed, "give me strength." But the figures who stepped into the hallway when Brenda flung open the door were not the grim-faced paramedics or psychiatric orderlies she was expecting. Instead, two burly men in work overalls, carrying toolboxes and heavy-duty flashlights, flanked a stern-faced woman in a sharp business suit, a woman whose eyes radiated an unshakable authority. It was Martha Jenkins, my miracle worker, looking every inch the avenging angel I needed her to be. Brenda stopped dead in her tracks, her welcoming smile freezing, then faltering into a bewildered frown. "Well, who are you?" she stammered, her carefully rehearsed script suddenly useless. "There must be some mistake. We're expecting someone else entirely." "For Mrs. Periwinkle." Martha Jenkins stepped forward, her gaze sweeping past Brenda to meet mine with a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of reassurance before fixing Brenda with an icy stare. "There's no mistake, Mrs. Periwinkle," Martha stated, her voice cool and clear, cutting through Brenda's confusion like a surgeon's scalpel. "We are representatives of Stonebridge Developments. We are here to take possession of this property, as per the legally executed sale agreement, finalized this morning at 8:30 a.m. The previous owner, Mrs. Agnes Periwinkle, has vacated. The house now belongs to our client." This first massive blow landed with the force of a physical impact. Brenda swayed, her hand flying to her throat, her eyes wide with a dawning, incredulous horror. Mark, who had come to stand behind her, simply gaped, his face draining of all color. "Sold?" Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking, all pretense of composure vanishing in an instant. "Sold? What are you talking about? She can't sell this house. It's ours. Mark, tell them. Tell them this is a ridiculous, insane mistake. Agnes she's not competent. She's scheduled to be taken for an evaluation this morning." Her voice rose to a hysterical pitch, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her ears with every word Martha Jenkins uttered. It was beautiful, in a terrible, righteous sort of way. This was the beginning of her downfall, the first notes in a symphony of consequences she had so arrogantly composed for me, now playing out for her instead. That was my cue. I stepped forward, the copy of the fully executed sale agreement, courier to Carol's just an hour before, held firmly in my hand. "Actually, Brenda, dear," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, resonating with a strength I hadn't known I possessed, "there's no mistake at all. I sold the house. Yesterday. While you were so busy planning my illegal committal and picking out new drapes for my living room, I was ensuring my own future. A future that doesn't include you, or this house, or your poisonous presence. You see, Arthur, in his infinite wisdom, left this property solely to me. My name alone on the deed. Mine to live in, mine to cherish, and, as it turns out, mine to sell when parasites threaten to consume it, and me along with it." The truth, stark and undeniable, hung in the air. Brenda stared at the document in my hand as if it were a viper poised to strike. You forged this," she spat, her eyes wild. "You senile old witch, you tricked us. Mark. She's lost her mind. Call the police. Call Ms. Albright. Call somebody." Mark, however, was a statue of stunned disbelief, his jaw slack, his eyes darting between me, Brenda, and the impassive figures of Martha Jenkins and her crew. The fight seemed to have drained out of him, replaced by a dawning, sickening understanding of the abyss they had just plunged into. He looked at me, a flicker of something, fear? Regret? In his eyes. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. What have you done?" "What I was forced to do, Mark," I replied, my voice hardening as I met his gaze. "What any sane woman would do when her own son and his grasping wife conspire to strip her of her home, her dignity, and her freedom. You made your choice when you stood by and let her orchestrate my destruction. Now you get to live with the consequences of her greed and your unforgivable weakness." Martha Jenkins, ever the professional, stepped forward again. The former Mrs. Periwinkle's daughter-in-law," she addressed Brenda, deliberately omitting her name, a subtle but effective power play. "The sale is final and legally binding. Stonebridge Developments requires vacant possession immediately. My crew is here to secure the property and begin preliminary work for its redevelopment. You and your husband will need to remove your personal belongings by the end of the day. Anything left after that will be disposed of." Redevelopment. Disposed of. The words were like hammer blows. Brenda's face contorted into a mask of apoplectic rage. "Get out," she screamed, lunging towards Martha, her hands curled into claws. "Get out of my house." One of Martha's burly companions moved with surprising speed, interposing himself, a silent, immovable wall. Just then, as if on cue, Carol's car pulled up outside, and she emerged, beaming, walking up the path with a cheerful, "Agnes, dear. Ready for our little outing?" The public spectacle was complete. Neighbors were beginning to peek from behind their curtains, drawn by Brenda's shrieks. The humiliation, the public downfall she had so meticulously planned for me, was now hers to savor in all its bitter glory. Brenda, realizing she was utterly defeated, that her castle had turned to dust, slumped against the doorframe, a torrent of invective, curses, and threats pouring from her lips, directed at me, at Martha, at the world. Mark just stood there, white-faced and trembling, looking utterly broken, the full weight of their homelessness, their ruin, crashing down upon him. The crew from Stonebridge Developments, unfazed by the drama, began to bring in their equipment, their movements efficient, impersonal, a clear signal that the old order was over. The reckoning had well and truly begun. I took Carol's offered arm, my small, pre-packed suitcase already in her car. As I stepped out of my home for the last time, I paused on the threshold, turning back to face the wreckage of their lives. "You were so eager to see me leave by 9 a.m., Brenda," I said, my voice carrying clearly over her sobs and curses. "Well, it seems your wish has come true. We're all leaving. Just not quite in the manner, or to the destinations, you had so carefully planned, now is it?" Several months had drifted by since that cataclysmic morning, months that I had filled with the quiet, steady work of rebuilding not just my life, but my spirit. The proceeds from the sale of Arthur's house, my house, had afforded me a comfortable, sun-drenched apartment in a new part of the city, one with a small balcony overflowing with the vibrant geraniums I'd always loved but Brenda had deemed common. I'd reconnected with old friends, joined a watercolor class, even started volunteering twice a week at a bustling community outreach center that provided meals and support for those less fortunate. It was there, amidst the clatter of soup spoons and the murmur of hopeful conversations, that fate, or perhaps Arthur's lingering sense of cosmic justice, orchestrated our final, unavoidable encounter. I was helping serve lunch, a hearty beef stew whose aroma filled the warm, steamy hall, when I saw them. Tucked away at a corner table, hunched over their trays like two bedraggled crows, were figures so shockingly altered, yet so chillingly familiar, that the ladle nearly slipped from my grasp. Brenda, her once immaculately styled hair now lank and greasy, her expensive clothes replaced by ill-fitting, stained garments that looked as though they'd been salvaged from a charity bin. Her face was gaunt, etched with lines of bitterness and a desperate, hungry look I'd never seen there before. And beside her, Mark. My son. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, the ghost of the man he used to be, staring blankly into his bowl of stew with an air of utter, soul-crushing defeat. My breath caught in my throat. A maelstrom of emotions churned within me, a sickening pity for the wretched state of my child, a cold, hard knot of satisfaction at the sight of Brenda brought so devastatingly low, and an overarching sense of sorrowful inevitability. This was the consequence, the final, ugly chapter of their own making. I hadn't sought them out, hadn't wished for this precise, squalid tableau, but here it was, the universe delivering its verdict in the most public and humiliating of ways. As if sensing my gaze, Brenda looked up, her eyes, those once sharp, calculating orbs, now dull and red-rimmed, scanned the room, and then locked onto mine. For a moment, there was only stunned, mutual recognition. Then, her face contorted, not with shame, not with remorse, but with a fresh surge of her old, familiar venom. She lurched to her feet, nearly upsetting their table, her voice, though weaker, raspy from disuse or perhaps cheap cigarettes, still carried that familiar accusatory shriek. "You," she hissed, drawing the attention of everyone nearby, her finger, now grimy and unmanicured, pointing directly at me. "This is your fault. Look at us. Look at what you've done to us. You destroyed our lives, you vindictive old crone. You threw us out onto the streets with nothing. You have to help us. You owe us." Her outburst, so pathetically predictable, was a desperate attempt to reclaim some shred of her former dominance, to once again cast me as the villain and herself as the wronged victim. But the script had changed, and the audience was no longer hers to command. Mark, his face flaming with a mixture of shame and terror, grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back down. "Brenda, stop it. For God's sake, have you no dignity left?" he muttered, his voice hoarse. "Leave her alone. This isn't, she doesn't," but Brenda shook him off, her eyes still blazing at me. "Dignity?" she scoffed, a wild, desperate laugh escaping her lips. "She took our dignity. She took everything. Our home, our future. You think you can just walk away, Agnes, after what you did? After ruining your own son?" It was then, seeing the raw, unadulterated blame still pouring from her, the complete absence of any self-awareness, that any lingering vestiges of pity I might have felt for her evaporated like mist on a cold morning. I placed my ladle down carefully on the counter and walked towards them, not with anger, not with triumph, but with a profound, weary calm that seemed to unnerve Brenda more than any shouted retort could have. The buzzing hall grew quiet around us, a circle of curious, compassionate faces watching this unexpected drama unfold. I stopped a few feet from their table, my gaze steady on Brenda's contorted face, then shifting to Mark, who now refused to meet my eyes, his shoulders hunched in a posture of utter desolation. "No, Brenda," I said, my voice quiet but carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "I didn't do this to you. You, and Mark, did this to yourselves. Every single step of this miserable journey, you paved with your own greed, your own cruelty, your own choices. You plotted to strip me of my home, the sanctuary Arthur built for me, so you could pay off your debts and live a life you hadn't earned," I continued, my words measured, each one a carefully placed stone in the wall of their culpability. "You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent, to shuffle me off to some institution, forgotten and alone, simply because I was an inconvenience to your grand designs. You systematically gaslighted me, turned my own son against me, and reveled in what you thought was my impending destruction. You sowed the wind, Brenda, and now you are reaping the whirlwind. This isn't my doing. This is karma, plain and simple, serving you the bitter dregs of a cup you so eagerly filled for me. Brenda opened her mouth to spew more invective, but for once, no sound came out. My calm, unwavering recitation of her sins seemed to have finally pierced her armor of self-delusion, leaving her momentarily speechless, her face a mask of impotent fury. Mark, however, slowly lifted his head. His eyes, when they finally met mine, were filled with a profound, heartbreaking despair, and something else, a flicker of genuine, agonizing remorse. Mom, he choked out, his voice thick with unshed tears. She's right, Bren. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I let you. I followed. I am so sorry, Mom. For everything. I know it means nothing now, but, his voice trailed off into a ragged sob, his entire body shaking. This broken apology from my son, was the true massive blow of the encounter, not to me, but to the last vestiges of Brenda's manipulative hold. To see him finally acknowledge his part, to see that glimmer of the boy I had raised peering through the wreckage of the man he had become, it was a complex, painful kind of victory. It didn't absolve him, not by a long shot, but it was a crack in the wall of his denial. Brenda stared at him, aghast, as if he too had betrayed her by daring to speak the truth. The role reversal was complete, starkly, brutally displayed for all to see. I, the intended victim, stood before them, not wealthy, perhaps, but secure, at peace, giving back to the community. They, the would-be conquerors, were broken, destitute, dependent on the kindness of strangers for their next meal. I reached into my purse and took out a small bill, enough for a few more meals, perhaps a night in the cheapest, cleanest shelter they could find. I held it out, not to Brenda, whose eyes latched onto it with a desperate, animalistic hunger, but to Mark. This is for you, Mark, I said gently, my voice softer now. Not for her. Use it wisely. Perhaps to buy a bus ticket, to get away from her influence, to start trying to rebuild a life based on honesty and hard work, not on schemes and shortcuts. As for you, Brenda, and my gaze hardened as I turned to her, you are on your own. You wanted everything. Now you have exactly what you deserve, nothing but the consequences of your own venomous heart. Brenda lunged for the money in Mark's trembling hand, but he, for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, pulled away from her, clutching the bill tightly. Her face crumpled, and a raw, animalistic howl of pure, unadulterated despair tore from her throat. The fight was finally, truly gone, replaced by the terrifying, empty void of her own making. I didn't need to say another word. Their current reality was the loudest pronouncement of all. I turned and walked back to the serving line, the murmurs of the crowd a soft, sympathetic wave behind me, leaving them there, shipwrecked on the shores of their own greed, the ultimate, climactic showdown over, the dramatic justice not just served, but embodied. To witness Brenda and Mark in that soup kitchen, stripped bare of their arrogance, their meticulously crafted illusions shattered into a million jagged pieces, was not an experience of simple, vindictive triumph. No, it was far more profound than that. It was like watching the final, irrefutable equation of justice resolve itself, a chilling affirmation that the universe, in its own inscrutable way, keeps a meticulous ledger. Every cruelty, every act of deceit, every calculated blow they had delivered with such gleeful impunity, had been recorded, and the invoice, when it finally came due, was devastatingly, irrevocably accurate. That encounter was the universe slamming its gavel down, the final, undeniable judgment in a case they had unknowingly built against themselves with every lie, every sneer, every act of calculated malice. Looking back, that initial, explosive confrontation at the barbecue, where Brenda, with Mark as her silent, complicit shadow, had so publicly and callously declared my impending exile to Golden Meadows, feels like a lifetime ago. She truly believed she was untouchable then, that I was nothing more than a senile old woman, a piece of inconvenient furniture to be discarded so she could more easily plunder my life. What a catastrophic miscalculation. She couldn't see that her words, intended as a massive blow to crush my spirit, were instead the very sparks that ignited a firestorm of righteous fury and a desperate, cunning will to survive. That moment, her supposed triumph, was in reality the first nail in the coffin of her own comfortable existence. Think of the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of their conspiracy, the gaslighting, the attempts to declare me incompetent, the secret appraisals of my home while I was still living in it, the relentless psychological torment designed to break me. Brenda, so clever in her cruelty, so sure of her superiority, never once considered that the frail old lady might possess a mind sharper than her own, a spirit tougher than tempered steel, and most importantly, a husband whose love and foresight had laid a perfect, legal snare for predators just like her. Her every move to undermine me, every whispered lie and staged intervention, only served to deepen my resolve, to turn my fear into a weapon. She thought she was cornering a helpless mouse. She had no idea she was prodding a sleeping lioness who held the keys to the entire kingdom. And Mark, my son. His journey is perhaps the more tragic, a cautionary tale of how weakness, how the abdication of one's own moral compass in the face of a dominant, manipulative personality, can lead to such utter ruin. His betrayals were not always as flamboyant as Brenda's, but they were, in many ways, more wounding. Each time he chose her side, each time he dismissed my fears, each time he actively participated in her schemes, from ransacking my private papers to signing those horrifying committal forms, was a turn of the knife in his own mother's heart. He allowed himself to become her puppet, her enabler, and in doing so, he became an architect of his own desolation. The price for such profound disloyalty, such moral cowardice, is a heavy one indeed, paid out in lonely nights and a lifetime of regret. So, where are they now, these architects of their own misery? Brenda, from what little I hear through the grapevine, because even her own family eventually washed their hands of her toxicity, never truly recovered. She drifts from one dead-end job to another, her beauty faded, her once sharp mind dulled by bitterness and an unquenchable, corrosive resentment. She learned nothing. She blames everyone but herself, me, Mark, the new owners of the house, the world at large. She's a ghost haunting the ruins of a life she deliberately torched, a living testament to the fact that a heart consumed by greed and entitlement eventually devours itself. There was no turnaround for Brenda, only the relentless, grinding consequence of her own unrepentant nature, a massive, life-shattering blow from which she will never recover because she refuses to see her own hand in it. Mark, however, is a different story, one still being written in faint, hesitant strokes. That $20 I gave him in the soup kitchen, a small gesture of a mother's enduring, if deeply wounded, love, he used it, as I'd hoped, for a bus ticket. He left Brenda that very day, or so he wrote in a shaky, tear-stained letter that found its way to me months later, forwarded by Carol. He works, he tells me, as a handyman in a small, quiet town far from the city's temptations and his past failures. He's sober. He's in counseling. He speaks of shame, of a deep, gnawing guilt, and of a desperate, fragile hope that one day, he might be able to forgive himself, even if I, his mother, never fully can. His path to redemption, if it exists at all, is long and arduous, a daily confrontation with the man he allowed himself to become. His story is a stark reminder that while choices have consequences, the possibility of a turnaround, however painful, however incomplete, can begin with a single, courageous step away from a destructive past. And as for me, Agnes Periwinkle, the old woman they so foolishly underestimated, I found more than just safety and security. I found a vibrant, unexpected autumn for my life. My little apartment, filled with light and laughter and the scent of my own baking, is a true sanctuary. My watercolor paintings, once a forgotten passion, now adorn my walls and even the homes of a few cherished friends. Italy was everything I dreamed it would be, and more. I travel, I learn, I volunteer, I connect. The proceeds from Arthur's house, my house, have not just given me comfort, but a profound sense of freedom and the ability to make a small difference in the lives of others. My greatest triumph wasn't just outsmarting Brenda, it was rediscovering the joy and purpose that she, and my grief for Arthur, had almost extinguished. This was my ultimate turnaround, a life reclaimed from the ashes of their malice. So, what is the great moral lesson in all this drama, these betrayals, these shocking reversals of fortune. It is this, and I implore you to listen closely: never, ever, underestimate anyone based on their age, their perceived frailty, or their quiet demeanor. The still waters often run deepest, and the ones you dismiss as powerless may hold the very keys to your own destiny. Furthermore, understand that greed is a cancer of the soul. It whispers promises of unearned riches and undeserved status, but its true price is always paid in misery, isolation, and the irretrievable loss of one's own humanity. Brenda and Mark reached for what wasn't theirs, and in doing so, they lost everything that truly mattered. Remember, too, that respect is not a gift to be bestowed selectively. It is a fundamental debt we owe to every human being. To treat your elders, or anyone for that matter, with contempt, to view them as obstacles or burdens, is not just cruel, it is a profound act of foolishness. For in their experiences lies wisdom, in their hearts lies a history you may never comprehend, and sometimes, in their possession lies a power you never saw coming. Finally, know that no matter how dire the circumstances, no matter how deep the betrayal, the human spirit possesses an astonishing capacity for resilience and righteous action. When pushed to the breaking point, true strength is not found in surrender, but in the courage to fight back with every ounce of your being, with intelligence, with foresight, and sometimes, with a plan so audacious it leaves your oppressors gasping in the ruins of their own wicked designs. Therefore, I urge you, look around at the people in your life. Your parents, your grandparents, your neighbors, your colleagues. See them. Truly see them. Offer your kindness, your patience, your respect, not as a transaction, but as a reflection of your own character. For you never know when you might be entertaining an angel, or underestimating a quiet warrior who holds the power to change your world, or theirs, in an instant. Choose integrity. Choose compassion. Choose to build, not to destroy. Because what goes around, most assuredly, always comes around. And the ledger of life, my friends, is always, eventually, balanced.